So work has continued on the laundry room cabinet, which is being repurposed from an old shelf that we used to have in the closet. It's coming along pretty good at this point. The first thing we needed to do was sort of put it in the space to see if the shelf placement was going to work for us, and kind of start figuring out how that was going to go. And once we kind of had the shelving figured out, where it was going to work best for the things that were going to be going in there, I started to cut down some face frames that can be placed over that plywood edge, so you no longer have that plywood edge. So I just cut these all to size and glued them and tacked them into place so that it would have a nice finished edge. And it's working into the night because it's getting dark early these days. So then I started work on the door frames, and those are just made out of pine, and I ripped them all down on my table saw and got them to the right size, and I laid them out on the carcass to kind of figure out how big they needed to be, because I hadn't quite figured that out yet. And once I had them all cut to shape, then I glued them together and added some pocket screws to hold it all together. Now, this would have been a real good time for me to check that these things were all square all the way around, but I didn't. Instead, I moved on to the panel recess, where this is where the panel is going to sit in the back, and so it'll be nice and flush with the door. And then I needed to make those panels. And I cut those out of some beadboard molding that we had left over from when we did our kitchen the first time, a long time ago. And once those were cut up, I put them in the doors and laid the doors on the carcass to see how it was going to go. Then it was on to door hinges. And I made a little jig to kind of make sure that they ended up in the same place, and put hinges on. And when they were all put in, I had opening doors ready to go into the laundry room. But not quite yet done. I have yet to find some way to hang it on the wall. It also needs to be painted, and we don't know what color yet. That's next on the things to do. Another project that I've taken up is this idea I had of making a model of our home. Originally I was going to 3D print it, but I haven't figured out exactly how I'm going to model that yet in 3D. That's going to be a whole thing unto itself. So I thought I would just try and make a model out of cardboard and cut it all out on the laser. So I was fortunate enough to find these drawings that are almost exactly the same as the footprint of our home. And I just brought them into Illustrator, made vector line drawings of all the parts of the house. Once I had all the parts figured out, I lined them all up and sent them to the printer. I started with this high quality cardstock. And from there I just let the printer do its job cutting these things out. The laser makes quick work of cutting these things out. That's the easy part, if you can believe it. Then the hard part comes with gluing them all together. This takes a long time, which is why the video is sped up, because you wouldn't want to watch me assemble one of these things over like 20 or 30 minutes. So it is pretty neat. It came together pretty good. Some of that meat texture made it right to the roof of the garage, so I went ahead and made another roof piece to go over. Hide the meat. Hide the meat. And there it is, the completed 3D model of our house, made out of cardboard, cereal boxes. So that was really super fun. I enjoyed doing that, and Of course, it's an unfinished project at this point, and you know what, this is where it'll stop. So if you wondered how unfinished projects work, it works exactly like this. I take it to this point where I have something a tangible thing that is pretty cool, but rather than actually paint it or finish it or completely build a diorama and bring it all the way to being finished, I don't. I move on to something else. So speaking of unfinished projects, Oh, here we go. These are canoes that were intended to be used for a table display for Christmas at our local canoe club. And by the time I was getting to the point where they were close to being finished, the pandemic hit and they stopped having the Christmas parties. Well, I'm not sure if they're going to have Christmas parties or not anymore, or what they might do, but I've offered them up to the club and they've accepted. They're made out of redwood. You can see that. They say Mele Kalikimaka on them for Christmas. So that's the idea, that they would sit kind of on that little stand. So there they are. I seem to have project ideas in my head all the time. I would say 3 or 4 pretty solidly that I'm always kind of thinking about, how am I going to do this and how am I going to approach that, and if I were to build it, what would I do? And those project ideas are always there. And then I'll have little visiting ideas of things that come in that I'm probably not going to do, but they're just sort of fleeting and exciting. But mostly it's like those 3 or 4 projects I just keep thinking about all the time, and how am I going to do them? And one of those projects is to build more of these. I'd like to be able to set up to just keep building them and make as many as I want, and potentially go into a little hobby business selling custom built archtop ukuleles. I'm going to use this prototype to sort of think about how I can make these things, a lot of these things. Because this one was just made out of stuff that I had lying around, I didn't make any special fixtures or jigs to do it, really. I just sort of went at it and did it with the things I had on hand. If you were to do something like this for real, you need a number of fixtures and jigs and all sorts of forms and things to sort of bring it together. You'd need one for bending the sides, and you'd need one for holding it all together when you're gluing it up. And I would also like to figure out a way that I can do this repeatably using the little hobby CNC machine that I've got over here behind me. I've always wanted to be able to do that. It's not like you can just cut one all out real easy. Each one of these parts is so complicated on its own. There are so many complex curves and shapes on here that it becomes really difficult to figure out how to do those. I haven't decided exactly where I'm going to start yet, but my thoughts are continuously on what methods I'm going to use to do each part and how I'm going to do it and what the best approach might be. I will have to make fixtures for this, so before I can even consider making one of these, I have to make all kinds of fixtures for it and everything else. So I'm really at a very early stage of thinking about this, but I am thinking about it a lot, and it's one of the 3 or 4 projects that are always in my head. That's it for this time. Those are the things that have been going on here.